It's my honor to welcome all of you, residents, business leaders, and distinguished guests to the Mayor's first State of the City address. No doubt, this is a first of many and will become one of the wonderful traditions that we have here in the city of Tucker. Before we begin our program as speakers, I'd like to bring out the color guard from the Tucker High School Air Force JROTC. These students represent more than 100 young men and women in the JROTC program who are learning the core values of integrity, service, and excellence. They will now lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Color guard, fall in. Vote, word, march.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you would please rise.
Colors. Hold. Ma'am. Colors are present. Ma'am.
Post.
Colors. Turn. Colors. Hold. Post. Colors. Turn. Color guard. Hold. Right. Pace. Forward. Arch. Color guard. Hold. Left. Pace. Half left. Pace. Present. Arms.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you would please join me in the recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order. Arms. Colors. Turn. Forward. Arch.
So if there's one thing that I've learned since being in Tucker is that Tucker turns out, and that's certainly on display here tonight, or this afternoon. Many people in this room have given their time and talents with just absolutely no thought of their own self and needs. And they are the people who are making the city of Tucker the growing and thriving place that you love to call home. So I'd like to recognize some of them. I'm going to start with the Community Council. The members of that board are Will Arroyo, Seth Burrow, Tommy Lupo, Frank Luton, Frank Zapp, and Kara Schroeder, and John Waters. On our Planning Commission, we have Catherine Atterbury, Damian Clark Presley, Ann Coppage, George Wellborn, and Mike Williams. And on the Zoning Board of Appeals, we have Chuck Abbott, Keith Easterling, Chris Hartley, Pat Soltis, and Neil Stebelfeld. And finally, you might not know them all by name, but we have a wonderful city staff here at Tucker. These people have brought their professional talents to the city to provide such city services as code enforcement, planning and zoning, and many city meetings and great events like you're witnessing today. So I'd like them all to at least stand, and I'd like to now acknowledge our great city staff here in Tucker. So with that said, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, someone else who has dedicated countless hours to preserving the future and the past of our great city of Tucker. Please welcome the president of the Tucker Historical Society, Matthew Lee.
What an exciting day. We're here on the eve of Tucker Day, a 60-day tradition here in our community. It's very exciting, a volunteer-led event. I think 5 years ago, if someone would have said there would have been a city hall on Adrian Street and an annex on First Avenue, people wouldn't have believed it. But 4 years ago, in 2013, there began to be some rumblings about cities on the edges of Tucker. And one proposal that included being just 1,000 feet from where we stand right now. And those rumblings woke a determination in nearly all of us. Amazing people came out of the background to answer the call to find a solution. New friendships were made, and people began to discover the heart of Tucker. Not to be too proud of ourselves, but we began to realize that this was a much more rich and vibrant community than many had imagined. And it was really the right time for Tucker to consider new options and chart a course. But Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither was Tucker. What happened between 2013 and 2015 was because there was a foundation of volunteerism that had been here for years. Something about being part of a rural community with so many churches and business connections and family connections, people began to understood there's a way to get things done right in a way that people can feel good about when you're unified together. It was all possible because Tucker already had trusted leaders. People who had a lifetime of experience and understood the strength of councils, the importance of working together towards a common goal, holding our tongue and delaying judgment, and doing the right thing simply because they needed to get done. So going from an unincorporated community to one that never had a city government, we did that because there were strong business connections and strong relationships to do the things that are right. Some people said, well, what's going to happen when you become a city? Is all the volunteer work going to go away? And to that, the answer was clearly no. Becoming a city didn't mean that work slowed down. It meant that it opened new opportunities to keep doing it in the right way. So soon we're going to hear from our mayor. That's what y'all are here for. But before we hear from Frank Auman, we're going to hear from another Auman. Someone we've grown to appreciate and love for the light and goodness that she shares in the community. Longtime Tucker resident, lifetime DeKalb resident, Tucker's First Lady, Gay Auman.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It is my honor and pleasure to stand before you today in our new city annex. It's very exciting. Even though construction on this beautiful facility began just a few months ago, this has been really a long time coming. You see, Tucker actually began over 125 years ago with hardworking, active citizens. 4 years ago, another group of hardworking, active citizens met together to form what would become Tucker Together, Tucker 2014, Tucker 2015, and then what became known in our house as Tucker 24/7. My husband was one of those citizens. Frank has always been one who's had a passion for community, an understanding of government, and a commitment to work. His entrepreneurial spirit and his experience on various boards, church, school, and neighborhood civic associations led him to where he is today, helping a lot of others to start this new city. Of course, many of you know him as a businessman and a civic leader, but I'm proud to know this man as a wonderful father to our 3 daughters and a loving husband. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to introduce to you the very first mayor for our new city of Tucker, my husband, Frank Auman.
Well, hard to even get started after an introduction like that. And I have to tell you, somebody asked me earlier if I was nervous about my speech today. I said, I'm really not. I speak a fair amount in public, but this is an occasion where I may get a little choked up. There's a lot going on here today, and I wish you could see the room the way that I see it, because I see the people that work their behinds off, going to meetings, twisting the arms of legislators, attending the events, setting up the meetings. So many of y'all who had a part and still have a part, and some of you who have more than one part, serving in multiple roles around. So it's an exciting day where there's a lot to celebrate here. It's a significant day for us. Matthew mentioned that tomorrow is the 60th annual Tucker Day, 60 years, volunteer run. We just passed our 125th anniversary of our founding, which we consider to be when we got a post office and a train depot. That happened in 1892. In those days, that was literally how you got yourself on the map. So that was 125 years ago, and we just passed our first anniversary as a new city, elected officials, operating a city government. So it's a big day for us in a lot of ways, and I'm grateful that all of y'all are here and interested to hear the first State of the Union. Would that I could. State of the city. So we're about to enter into the part of the program where the mayor introduces lots of important dignitaries and friends and people who are doing work around the city, and then proceeds to forget or overlook a few. But let me begin with some of that, because with everything about Tucker, the city in the end is the people who live and work and play and pray here. And many of y'all are here today who had a big part in all of that. So first, let me introduce your city council. They're all seated together over here. We have Honey Vandekreek, Bill Rosenfeld, Michelle Pincava, Ann Lerner, Noel Monfordini, and Matt Robbins. Very much. Thanks for your work. As I talk a little bit about what's been going on with the city, in addition to all the volunteers and the boards of people that you met, others who will probably remain nameless to you, this is who's getting the work done. This is who's day in and day out. You see them at a meeting, and for every hour you see them in a meeting, they've got 10 or 20 hours behind that meeting, preparation, thought, talking to you about your preferences and priorities and so forth. So many others. I want to call out some and recognize some. You've heard it mentioned, and you'll always hear it mentioned, that the volunteer base in Tucker is and was and has been and will always be our greatest strength. It's the reason when we were advocating for cityhood, the common response was, the first response was, wait, you're not already a city? Right? The second response was, well, of course it makes sense for you to be a city. They know that feel is here. We were operating like a city, a very strong community before we were formally a city. So we have a Tucker Civic Association headed by Sonia Shubsky. I saw her a little while ago. We have a Tucker Business Association that happens to be headed by our councilwoman, Honey Vandekreek. Thank you for your work on that. I saw a couple people here from the Smoke Rise Civic Association, including the editor-publisher of the Smoke Rise, the Smoke Signal, which is just a great community builder over there, Cherie Snyder. Thank you for being here. You know, you heard from Matthew Lee, the head of our Historical Society, which is a particular favorite of mine. I think if we don't know, and I'll say this again later, if we don't know where we came from and how we got here, we are lost, and Matthew's in charge of preserving that passionately. He works at it. If you're not on his Facebook page, the Historic Society's Facebook page, you're really missing something, because regularly he publishes pictures that you'll recognize the places, you'll recognize some faces when they were much younger maybe, but it's great context and great asset for us to have. But there are many others. Friends of Parks are here. I know Kara was recognized in her role on another one. She's head of the Henderson Park Friends. Beth Ganga is here. I know she's doing a lot of work with John's Homestead. This is why it's hard to get started, because so many of you doing so many things. I want to recognize some of our businesses. I don't know, at some point we're gonna spend some time on our business community and educating the general public about the business community here, how strong it is, what an asset it is to all of us. We have big companies and big employers. John McHenry and I toured Rico a few days ago. 600 people working in a building you probably drive by 100 times a year and you have no idea. High-tech, high-touch stuff going on over there. Inland Seafood, 600 people. One of the top fresh seafood companies in the world, right in Tucker. We have Pepsi-Cola. If you didn't know it, one of Pepsi's most advanced bottling plants in the world is in the city of Tucker. There are others. My father-in-law, who's here, and my mother-in-law, I should point them out, and my daughter, Grace, thank you all for being here. He's a business owner in Tucker. I'm a business owner in Tucker. It can't be overstated how important it is for us to retain that kind of balance and good relationships with them. We also have two important business organizations called community improvement districts, which are voluntary, self-created, self-taxing organizations where those businesses join together and say, we're going to pay even more than the law requires us to pay in taxes so that we can improve those business districts from a safety point of view, from a beautification point of view, from a transportation point of view. They do all that together, and we have with us today the presidents of both of those. Joey Chapman is here from the Stone Mountain CID. Another one of our council members, Bill Rosenfeld, is the head of the president. What do we call you? The chairman? Chairman. The chairman of the North Lake, the Tucker North Lake Community Improvement District, and we have the executive directors of both of those, Ann Rosenthal from North Lake Tucker, and Emery Morseberger, who's the executive director for the Stone Mountain CID. And finally, I know they'll understand, it's customary at something like this to introduce elected officials and people like that who are in the room. I think they'll all understand that all of these are more important than they are. Is that fair enough? It is, it's true. And if you can keep that mentality while you're serving in public office, I think that's the right place to begin. So she tried to sneak in without being seen. I saw Michelle Hinson, Representative Michelle Hinson, come in, who was a great ally, an early supporter. In fact, she saved our life as a city before it ever began, because she was the one in the very beginning who submitted a bill that made it possible for Tucker 24/7 to provide on our doorstep. So thank you. We also have our two county commissioners, two of the county commissioners who represent our area. Steve Bradshaw is here, and Gregory Allen. A couple others who I should recognize. Captain Jackson is here. Where did he go? From our Fire and Rescue Department. Thank you. We have our own judge. You know, Tucker's in the court business now. We have what we call environmental court. And Judge Stephen Nicholas is here, who, if this is the only time you ever see him, that's probably a good thing. But he's doing a great job for us. We actually hold our court in Clarkston. They've made a deal with us to kind of borrow their facilities and their staff as a way to save ourselves some money and effort in the early going. But thank you for your service. And I'm excited to introduce the new principal from Tucker High School. Way back here in the corner, Tamara Watts. We're excited that you're on board. We love our high school, and we're ready to go to work for you, so you let us know how we can help. And I'll introduce one more since he's not here. My neighbor, Senator Steve Hinson, couldn't make it this afternoon, but he sent the better half anyway. His wife, Beth Henson, is here. I see her sitting over here. Thank you for being here, and please thank him for all of his efforts on behalf of Tucker as well. So, with that out of the way, I'm here to speak to you today about Tucker, the state of the city, which I take to mean, so how are things going in the city? Which is a question I get a lot, right? How are things going in the city? I usually say something like, well, I think we're doing pretty good. What do you think? And usually I get smiles and nods. I occasionally get an earful about some area where, let's say, we're not living up to our potential. But that's what I want to answer for you today, is kind of where we've been, how we doing, what's next, that sort of thing. And so, as I mentioned, I'm a fan of understanding where we are in the context of history and where we've been. I'm going to look back just a little bit to the period prior to cityhood. I want to talk about this first year and the specifics of some things we've done, and then moreover about the vision. So, Tucker's 125 years old. But as I said, we count that as the day when we got a train depot and a post office. Over all those years since then, people lived around here, they worked and they farmed, they raised families, they planted churches, they created a Main Street, which we all value as one of our greatest assets. Shopkeepers, doctors, lawyers, restaurants, those things have been there, craftsmen, where the people who lived mostly in these rural areas could come together, do their business, yes, but to gather and kind of live life together. They created a community. That's what Tucker is. That's what it was before we became a city. It's what we want to retain. It's the thing people recognized about Tucker that made them say, well, yeah, it makes sense that you would become a city. So they created that community, and over time, we inherited that community. That's us. We are the inheritors of all that. The other analogy people sometimes use is that we're standing on the shoulders of 125 years of people building this community. So as you know, as we mentioned, there's been a spate of new cities formed around the Atlanta area, and especially in DeKalb County. It's really, it seems like a long time, but it's really only 10 or 12 years. When Sandy Springs was formed, I'm not sure the exact number, maybe 11 years ago now, it was the first new city in Georgia in 100 years. It hadn't been done up until that time, but once that dam sort of broke and people got into the way of thinking about maybe a city would make sense for us, that thought was in Tucker as well. We didn't do anything about it right away, but as has also been mentioned, there came upon us this sort of existential threat from another city that was proposed. It was right next door to us, but it wasn't just next door. It was within a couple of blocks of here. I'm bad about pointing the wrong direction. Right across the street from Tucker High School. Somebody thought it would be a good idea to form a new city, not called Tucker, some other city, but it would extend into the intersection where Tucker High School is. And so those thoughts about maybe we should form a city and all that became more urgent, and the idea sort of began to crystallize. But here's what I want to say. I'm not going to go through all of that history. Here's the thing I really want you to know in the context of history. When those discussions came, and those of us who wanted to talk seriously about forming a new city began, there was a much, much bigger ideal at stake. It wasn't just a defensive reaction to somebody else wanting to form a city. And that ideal really is as old as Tucker itself. It's as old as the founding of our nation. And it's really not too much to say that it's as old as mankind. The ideal is self-determination. The idea that I can do a lot for myself, and that's the first place I should be looking. Taking charge of your own destiny, rugged individualism, whatever you want to call it, it's deeply rooted in the people of Tucker. And so, as we looked around and thought about cityhood, it became clear to us that there were some things that we really believed we could and should do better for ourselves right here in this place than another bigger, more distant government could do, even with the best of intentions. There are things we can do better for ourselves, and we wanted to take those on. And that's really the thought, that's really the core of what we decided we wanted to do in forming a city. Can I pause just a minute and introduce one of my fellow mayors? Denny Shortle just sneaked in the room from Dunwoody. Thank you for coming out. So, in forming the new city of Tucker, we were very intentional and we were very careful to choose the things that we really believed we could do better here ourselves at home, and also to choose the things that we were better off joining with a larger community to do. We were careful in all those ways. Some people called that city light, which is okay, but generally meant as kind of a derogatory term. Around here we call it city smart, because we think it's the right way to go, the right thing to do, and I think we're proving that out today. We're going to talk about some of those things. We also created the most well-balanced city of any of those cities that have been formed in the last 10 or 12 years. If you look at Tucker by race, age, income level, balance of our economic assets, restaurants, commercial, industrial, retail businesses. If you look at Tucker by political affiliation, there's not a label that can stick to us. We're a community of variety that knows how to get along, and that's the real strength of Tucker. So I want to give you a brief recap of what we've worked on in this first year of functioning as a city. As promised, those of you who are around, as promised, we opened a bank account. We got, right, you remember, that was the first promise I made, wasn't it? We got official email addresses, we created a website, we became somebody because now we're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We have a GIS and mapping division capabilities that rivals the most sophisticated of any city anywhere. I'm talking about big cities, any city you want to name. You'll see things in here when we have meetings. There's some maps back here. Those are all things we can produce ourselves. So when we're working on economic development or talking about zoning or trying to figure out where the boundaries of the cities are and where we can make some headway, it's a huge asset. So we began holding meetings as regular meetings as soon as possible. In these first 15 months, I'm not sure I have an official count, but I can easily say we've held over 100 public meetings of various kinds. Hearings, board meetings, city council, work sessions. We had a retreat. That's a lot of work. There's a lot that goes into that. But of course, as I said earlier, for every meeting and every hour of meeting time, there are hours and hours of preparation by all the people involved. So what's been accomplished by all of that? First thing I'm proud to say is we've learned to work well together as a council. Have we not come a long way? Once we were elected and able to conduct business, we adopted the basic ordinances under which we operate. We assumed authority over things like business licenses, alcohol licenses, franchise fees, so on. We appointed the boards who were introduced earlier, and they've gone on to do tremendous work. Y'all, those people, those are not honorary positions. Those are people that are doing real work, and honestly, they're making hard decisions on behalf of their community, knowing that the decisions they make are not always popular with everybody. It's just not going to happen that way. So thank you again to them. We leased and moved into our own city hall. We made it fully functional with all the equipment and other resources that it needs to serve our city. We hired a city manager, a city attorney, a city clerk, an economic and community development director, building inspectors, code enforcement officials, and startup staff, by the way, of 3 different contractors, but led by CH2M, y'all. We wouldn't have got 1 foot down the road without CH2M. I'm telling you, we were on our own for that first month or 2 or 3 and thrashing around trying to figure out what was important, what needed to come next. When we brought in the professionals, people who've done this before, people who could tell us what we needed to know and what was the next priority and how to get it done, how to stay out of jail doing it. Right? This politics is a game of staying out of jail. Not that you have to be corrupt or anything else, but you can get crosswise with the law without knowing it at all. So thank you to CH2M. A lot of them are here today. I should mention, if you haven't picked up one of these, this is our first ever annual report for the city. They're on the table outside here when you go out. We didn't budget for this. Just sort of forgot, didn't think about it. Didn't occur to us that we needed to do an annual report. So CH2M came along and said, you know what, let us do that for you for this first year. They laid it out, they printed it, they delivered it this morning, and so special thanks to them for filling that gap for us. What else did we do? In June, at 3 months old, we began code enforcement activities. We held our first court session in January. I introduced Judge Nicholas to you. That means we adopted all the ordinances and court proceedings, things that were necessary. We had to have a judge and a solicitor, everything that goes along with that. Thank you to Clarkston for cooperating with us as kind of a brother next door. We also took over last summer zoning. The first thing we did was conduct a thorough review of our zoning code. Lots of work went into that from our council, from our boards, from our professionals with CH2M. And then we initiated our zoning process. It's already produced some pretty exciting results, I think. As you look around town, you see our Facebook and website announcing openings and developments and things that are happening. It's good stuff. I mentioned we opened a bank account. We also applied and received a line of credit. So, you know, you're somebody when you can borrow money. We installed an accounting system. There's not, this stuff doesn't just show up. We had to install, we had to buy it, we had to get trained on it. We just completed our first audit, or I guess we're about to. The city's books are being audited every step of the way so that you can be sure that everything is as it should be regarding our finances. We've realized something like $6 million in revenue. We've already passed and about to complete our second balanced budget. We're about to pass our third budget, which will be our first full year budget beginning July 1 and run through June of next year. And we have $2 million in the bank in reserves for the work ahead. We established a Convention and Visitors Bureau to tell the world why they ought to visit Tucker, and we've fully funded it. So I tell you all this not to pat ourselves on the back, but to give you some context for what it takes to get from zero to where we are, and really to where we want to be in terms of time and money and energy and everything else that goes into it. So this has been a year of fundamentals, foundation building, and what I've listed really just scratches the surface, honestly. So what now? What is it we're trying to get to? It's important for all of us to know what our jobs are. Staff, which is a word I hesitate to use because it doesn't begin to describe. When we say staff, we're talking about the CH2M and other contractors, city managers, professionals in economic development. Matt Holmes, who's our communications guy, but also responsible for organizing all this today. So it's our staff that does the daily things that make the city run. For the council, it's about leadership. Right? Our job is to provide guidance, cast the vision for what the city wants to be, make strategic decisions. Those are the things that we do. We function more like a board of directors, right? The big policy-making kinds of things that give the city direction. Right now, we're in the process of gathering thoughts about that vision from the broader community, all of you, by way of our comprehensive plan we call Tucker Tomorrow. If you didn't get into the other room before the event started today, there's lots of information there about what people are saying they want Tucker to be and look like, and what our priorities are, and what our first next steps ought to be. The plan's not quite finished yet. It's still in process. You still have plenty of opportunity to give your input to it. But we're gathering information from all of you about what that vision should be. So when I talk about the future of Tucker and the vision, I kind of have to speak for myself in the particulars. Each person on council kind of has their own thoughts about it. We wouldn't necessarily all articulate it the same way. So I want to share with you where I'd like to lead us. If you've heard me speak anywhere over the last year, including 10 minutes ago, you've probably heard me say that I want Tucker to be a place where people can live, work, play, and pray, right? I want to expand on that a little bit for you and then give you an even shorter way of understanding it. When I say live in that context, what I mean is to make a home. I want anyone who's attracted to the lifestyle, the sense of community that we have here, to be able to find a place where they can make a home. Whether that's an apartment, or a townhome or a condominium, 2-bedroom bungalow someplace, a 6-bedroom estate with its own swimming pool and tennis courts, whatever it is. I want them to be able to stay in Tucker as their needs change. Whether you're growing a family, whether you're downsizing an empty nest. We want people to be able to stay here and find a place to live that suits them at all stages of their life. Whether it means living in a close community with amenities and your neighbors within walking distance, or whether you want to live someplace that's kind of hidden away from all the activity. Those places exist in Tucker. The city doesn't build those and own them and dictate that stuff, but we can encourage development of the kinds of things to fill the gaps that make Tucker that kind of a place where you can build a home. And that's what our city ought to be doing in that regard. And we can protect and nurture what we have. Work is a pretty easy one to understand. But again, what should the city be doing about it? Well, it turns out there are lots of things. The first is we let our businesses know that we love and appreciate the role they play in our community. And that's local shops and restaurants that we can patronize, but it's also big businesses like the ones that I mentioned who provide work opportunities. And when their employees want to live in the community where they work, it gives the ability to do that. We can make sure that their expansions go smoothly, that their permitting is reasonable, that their taxes are fair and simple. We can ensure that the city has the fastest, most reliable internet service anywhere, so that we attract high-tech businesses and healthcare businesses and other modern businesses of the future. But it also helps us attract the large and growing group who work from home or telecommute. And guess what? When they can do that, they get to eat lunch locally, they get to their kids' ball game or swim meet, they get to join the PTA or 100 other volunteer opportunities around town, and they still get to connect with their neighbors instead of sitting in traffic. That's where we want to go when we talk about work in Tucker and why it's so important, why it helps hold together the kind of community that we want to have. Play is one where the city can have a little more direct impact. We're going to be taking over the park system in this next year. It's part of the budget talk. You can come Monday night and hear us talk about it in more detail. So the city wants to offer a park system that includes a variety of opportunities for recreation in locations that are convenient and safe. If we can do those two things, we'll have a great park system. But play also includes restaurants and shopping and commercial entertainment, and it certainly includes events like Tucker Day and the other community events that we have downtown on Main Street. We want to make and keep Tucker a vibrant place where people want to spend their leisure time. And they only go someplace else if they just choose to. We want to have those things available to us here in Tucker. Pray is the fourth one, and it's one that I especially want to flesh out for you. I hope you don't think it means that the city's going to go into business building churches or anything like that, but I want you to know what I mean by it. And that is that we're going to value and appreciate and nurture the contributions of all of our communities of faith in Tucker. Whatever faith you practice or come from, or if you don't follow any particular faith at all, no one can deny the bedrock of support that they've been to Tucker even since before Tucker was Tucker. First Baptist dates its origins to 1890, 2 years before the post office and the train depot got here. First Methodist dates to 1904. First Presbyterian was founded as Antioch Church in 1899 at the corner of Chambly Tucker and North Crest Roads. But 31 years later, they moved across town. They're now on Fellowship Road. They moved in next door to it was just called Fellowship Baptist, which had been there since 1829. 1829, y'all. Since then, we've had dozens of churches form and flourish in Tucker. It includes Christian denominations that didn't exist 125 years ago and non-Christian faith communities who've built not just temples and mosques and churches, but communities of followers who've built the community of Tucker. These churches and many others continue to form and thrive here, and it's really their individual members who care for the poor, the infirm, the lonely, every sort of human and spiritual need in ways that government never can. Beyond that, on a practical level, they lend space for meetings and community events. They supply volunteers in droves. They support the Boy Scouts, run sports leagues. They provide social outlets for every demographic. They support our local food and clothing co-op, and much, much more. My message to them is thank you. As long as you're preaching and teaching to love your neighbor, care for the least among us, and you want to contribute to the success of the society in which you live, you are welcomed, you're respected, and you're held in high regard here. So when I list pray as the fourth leg of the foundation on which we'll stand in the future, I simply mean that we must forever recognize the indispensable role played by our community of faith. never forget or pretend that we could get along without them. We need to encourage them as an institution, and we need to proclaim their work for its benefits to all of our citizens in their individual lives. So, as we go forward, we'll certainly argue over zoning. We're going to argue over where the sidewalks should go. We're going to argue over which parks projects should go ahead of the others. But if we focus on these ideals, these pillars of a strong community, working together to build and nourish and sustain them, we'll have a city where our citizens can live their whole life. By focusing on a policy and strategic level on these four elements, by being mindful of them in all of our decisions, diligent in supporting and strengthening each of them, Tucker will be a place for your whole life. And that's my vision for all of us who love Tucker. A place where we can fully live every aspect of our lives for as long as we require a place. It's a privilege for me to serve as your mayor. There's not a dramatic pause. I really do thank you for giving me the opportunity, and thank you for being here today. I hope we'll see you all at Tucker Day tomorrow, and thank you for what you do for our community.